It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! It's Feedback Friday, and it's a back feedback. Thank you for the people on Wednesday's video who complimented my hair. That was unexpected. But yeah, I don't have headphones crammed on in these because of this thing. And I mean, the shadow face, I don't know. I don't have a place to put the microphone over here, so it's in the way of the light. Maybe I can change. Oh no, I can't because the window's there. That's why. Anyway, work in progress. But thank you. It is nice to occasionally get a positive comment on my appearance, even though it should not be relevant because the bulk of the comments I get are about how I'm old, fat, and ugly. So it's nice when you get those, and thank you. But the bulk of this is going to be about your comments. The patrons got the video that was supposed to go up Monday. I recorded something before New Year's, and then I was like, New Year's Day? Is that cheesy? I was torn, and then I decided I'd rather play Mario Wonder on New Year's Eve than upload a video, so I went with that. Honesty. So, yeah, the patrons actually got the video that I recorded but didn't upload, so at least it went somewhere. Cool. If you want the extra video a week, or if you just want to support the various initiatives that are going on, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK, or the GoFundMe for the men's group that will only be around for so long, because GoFundMe, I have found, does not allow messages sent to the group. They only have updates, so that isn't good for what we're doing. Now's a really good time to do it. Become a Patreon or support on Coffee. One, we have 2 sessions this week to make our goal for this week, but also the Discord invites go out this next week because it's coming up to the month. That's coming up to coffee billing. It's coming up to Patreon billing. And the purpose of becoming a patron, becoming, coffee, is that it's a credit card. You're a real person. I can track you. I verify people on the Discord, so that because I find it's really, really helpful that somebody knows that they are talking to a real verified person and not a troll or a bot. I do find that makes the conversation much more productive. And that's really important to me. I do think, as the comments reflected this week, I do think it's important that people feel like they have a place where they can discuss things, even contentious things. And what we're working on is not what's okay to talk about, it's what's the okay way to talk about it. And I realized I was leaning too far forward to try to avoid the shadow, and this is the back of the microphone. So technology, mic technique. Sorry. I'm tired and I'm goofy. Okay, let's get into your comments. Starting with Wellness Wednesday. One person said they're into a game right now called Lacuna, a retro pixel sci-fi future punk with cigarette smog. Cool. It's a war across the solar system, apparently. I'm glad video games and game shows allow me to space and just be a stranger in a new land again. The peace of mind feels like something from my days drawing alone as a kid. I think we're all looking for peace of mind, but we can't get it surrounded by online sticks and stones. Gotta go back to taking an interest in media built to let you wander and think in a safe environment. Nothing toxic about that, to be honest. Agreed. If the guy who's still upset with you won't let it go, then he actually wants it to be your fault to fix. Walking away sounds like a good idea for sure. We don't have 20 years to keep fixing faults. He needs to let you move away out of his life. It's over. That the stalker is actually a female, a woman, cisgender woman, even though she pretends to be a trans woman online. Charming person, this stalker Chan. But yeah, I don't like the treating of video games as immature or toxic behavior. This is in response to the Wellness Wednesday video on reactivity, like why we all freak out sometimes. I find video games very meditative. And it's meditative with shooting and me going fuck, 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 fuck at times, which is the best kind of meditation for inner Kratos, right? Also inner Billy Butcher. All of my inner voices have beards. The Far Cry games are that for me. I know some other people it's Fallout for the same reason. You're just trudging across, expanses of wilderness with music playing, and it's chill. I finally finished Alan Wake 2 on stream, yay, so I can talk about it. And I've got so many ideas about game-based videos in my head. I'm having trouble figuring out where to start. But I did very much enjoy Alan Wake 2 Trauma Simulator. If you have a person in your life and you want to understand what having a trauma condition is like, play this game and play on normal difficulty or higher, because you need the frustration. You need the holy shit, this is hard. Holy fuck, I'm never going to get this. Holy shit, I'm lost. But the way they depicted the dark place and showed self-doubt, I thought, and they actually have a technique in game for stopping the thought gremlins that is actually effective, which was very nice to see. They showed the tactic of posting, of having reminders, like my Armin, listen to Armin. I love Attack on Titan, and Armin's my favorite character, but it's also, Armin's the guy that nobody listens to until it's almost too late, and Armin tends to be right. And so I keep it here where even when people think you're wrong, even when everybody's going, you're stupid, shut up, just do it, listen to Armin. People did not listen to Armin. They did the same thing to Armin. It's just funny for his head to bobble, right? Yes, Armin. I love Armin. Okay. So, I have things like that around to sort of remind me of things I tend to forget, and it's better for my well-being if I listen to Armin. So, that stuff does where it sounds really silly, but that's the point. Sometimes all it is about is just putting something there that makes you happy, that makes you smile, that makes you laugh. It actually does, on a hormonal level, improve. And that doesn't mean you're being unserious. God, I'm so sick of this political extremes thing of we must be serious. We can't celebrate when there's suffering in the world. And it's like, there is always suffering in the world, you pretentious motherfuckers. The fact that you aren't aware of most suffering in the world does not mean it's not happening, you ego-driven shitbags. Obviously the personal attacks and swearing are for entertainment purposes only. But seriously, there's always suffering in the world. And if people weren't allowed to celebrate and get away from the suffering sometimes so that they can go back into it refreshed and be more effective without it destroying them, the black church in the US would not exist. Fucking hell, people. Be humans. I am so sick of that. We can't celebrate because there's suffering in the world. It just shows how ignorant people are. Any given year, there's a war somewhere. Any given year, there's hunger and starvation and suffering and people who are displaced. If it only matters when you know about it, that's not being an activist, that's being a narcissist in that moment. It doesn't just matter because you know about it. Learn more about the world. Talk to people with different viewpoints other than your own. And I do think gaming is really good for that. And one of the things, the game itself is really good for that. On the Discord, I am currently in an I Love Gale from Baldur's Gate 3 phase. Because I didn't like him at first. I thought he was an insufferable asshole. And that is deliberate. He is at first. He makes a bad first impression because it turns out he's shy and awkward and spends a lot of time alone, and he smells like books, and he cooks, and his best friend is a winged cat. I love this guy. You know, like, oh my God, like perfect. Like, oh my God, unsung hero of the freaking game. But a bunch of Polish gamers decided to celebrate New Year's by simultaneously blowing Gale up. And it's like, it's funny as shit. But why, man? Like, poor guy. But this, I mean, people can have very different opinions that, you know, cause conflict. And then we can all talk about Gale, and it's safe, and we can have a laugh, and that makes dealing with the differences easier. You know, like opinions on Shadowheart. No, I'm kidding. That is not a serious social issue. Like, it's okay to like Shadowheart. It's okay to not like Shadowheart. We need to separate these things. But you know what I mean, right? Gaming is amazing. And the people who treat it like an immature or toxic activity, I'll go so far as to say I question their motives, and I wonder if that's not some toxicity on their part as well. They don't understand it, and so they can't control it, and so they just demonize it. I can't prove that. That's just my working theory. Another person said, what do we mean when we talk about freedom is something that fiction can help with, since you can explore different ideas in depth and how they would work out? And I do think that's true. I think that this push that I think we're just coming out of in gaming of we must promote the right thing, you know, environmentally conscious Krogans. Why Mass Effect Andromeda? Why? We're coming out of that, and game developers are coming out of that, you know, feminist frequency induced protective crouch, where, you know, they didn't want to get called out by one fucking organization in all of gaming. Why? Because gaming didn't cultivate other feminist voices. And so everybody just lived in fear of the feminist frequency video, and that decided whether something was good or whether something was bad. And that's wrong. Because during that era, we got a lot of bland shit that actually wasn't any better for women or people of color, you know? And now we're getting these games, like, again, Alan Wake 2, the way, the role that Saga Anderson, that's the mixed race lady, the FBI agent, who's the actually the first playable character. Alan's the second, but she's not there just to be a mixed race lady. And, you know, there's cool little dissonant moments where she's out in a really misty rain with, you know, a curly ponytail. That would never happen with that. We were all like, no, unrealistic. No, she'd have something on her head. She wouldn't want to get her hair wet. But I don't think that was it was a miss. I think that actually dealt with the surreality and unreality of the setting. And there's other parts about Saga. The fact that she's mixed race, I think is relevant. It's one of my main theories about who Saga's dad is in the game. But also, you needed someone to sort of sympathize with, because the game deliberately makes Alan kind of up his own ass. Well, very up his own ass. And I thought that was cool, because you still feel for him. I mean, it's his name on the game. But you're allowed to find parts of him you don't agree with things. You do think he's a real jerk to some of the people around him. And the game allows you to have that opinion. And I do think it's very, very different when, you know, a studio like Remedy just sort of presents their vision and goes, well, we know elements of this game are going to be extremely challenging and some people aren't going to like it. But that's the point. It's a feature, not a bug. As opposed to what Larian did with Shadowheart, which is, we had this plan, but then people didn't like her in early access enough, so we're going to completely break her and put her back together. And then apparently they did the same thing with Will, but I don't remember Will from early access. Maybe he was there, but I don't remember him. Um, but he's kind of not terribly memorable in the game itself either to me. He's the next one I'm going to try to make myself like, because it worked with Gale. So I've not given up on Will yet. Maybe I just don't know enough. But when you change a character who is supposed to be prickly because people don't like them, and, you know, that's it to me, that is actually not respecting your player base. You're not respecting players to be grown-ups and grow from, like I did with Gale. I couldn't stand him at first. Now I love the guy. And part of the reason I'm like so Team Gale right now is because I couldn't stand him at first. And every single Dragon Age Origins character was like that for me. They started off, I'm like, oh God, this is such a cliche. You know, and then they sort of peel back like onions, and you go from that first impression to seeing there's a really elaborate, deep characterization there. And I love that shit. And if they're tinkering with a character because first impressions were bad when there's so much more game afterwards, like, what are you really doing here? You know what I mean? And I do think that this idea of that good and evil, concepts like freedom, concepts like safety, concepts like virtue are not simple. I think gaming has an ability to explore that like no other medium out there because of choice. You know, there's something satisfying about leaving Shadowheart behind in camp because this time I'm playing as a cleric and I don't need her ass. And the dislike I have it for the personal dislike makes it more fun. And I do think there's a benefit to having polarizing characters like that because it's the same way with siding with the goblins, right? I cannot bring myself to side with the goblins because baby owlbear. But the choice to not side with them adds value to the game. I'm not forced to side with the druids. I choose. And even though I will never make the evil choice, other people will. The choice still benefits me because I'm allowed to make it. And that is something unique in games. You don't get that in a movie. You don't get that in a TV show, right? That freedom, that ability, that sense of autonomy of thought is precious. And I think a lot of my camera froze. There we go. I think a lot of the dialogues, the social dialogues in gaming completely miss that. In order for good to matter, the evil option must be there. So that's the way I think video games talk about freedom to me. Now we're going to move on to the two women talking one. And I saved this because it's going to be, you know, I'm having fun with these comments. Well, one of them especially. Because I did kind of have a grrr, but no, I use humor to expose myself to different opinions. So this one's not, but here we go. I normally don't do two women talking comments, but this particular one, I need to really get clear on what's going on here because people are already missing the plot. Not this comment though. This actually touches on 2 points we talked about when masculinity becomes toxic, okay? This actually touches on 2 points that bother me a lot, one in fiction, one in reality. The fictional one is the selfish man learns a lesson trope. And sure, sometimes the man is actually selfish and maybe a lesson is warranted, but sometimes that selfishness is just basic self-care. I cite Roger from Rent and how the story portrayed him as selfish for not immediately being ready for a relationship with Mimi, who struggles with AIDS and drug addiction after recently losing a girlfriend to AIDS and drug addiction. Or the movie version of Hitchhiker's Guide, who portrayed Arthur Dent as a loser for not immediately running off to Europe with a woman he just met at a party. The one in reality is when people on the left make fun of men they either disagree with or just in general for defying a masculine norm, which you'd think they would say is a good thing. I am not a Jordan Peterson fan whatsoever, but I hate it when people on the left make fun of him for crying publicly. Or my dad forged a close friendship with another man and members of my family called him a boyfriend and made a lot of sexual jokes. I called them out on it and pointed out that men being friends with other men is a good thing, that it doesn't need to always be sexual, and they're buying into some very damaging masculine stereotypes that also, side note, make things harder for women. Or they did not mean their 15-minute rant on emotional labor from 2 days ago. Close male friendships will reduce that load on women. And I very much agree with that comment. I have also gone, hey, not cool for people mocking Jordan Peterson crying in public. I do think that the context when Jordan Peterson is breaking down indicates that something is really seriously wrong there. I don't think that's a contentious opinion, but now anyway, but that's not me mocking him. That's me having empathy with it's really tragic that a guy that smart and that accomplished doesn't have real support with people going, look, we are really concerned for your emotional state, regarding your emotional state. But I do think some people, a lot of people, especially people in academics, in the fields of, anything related to mental health, psychology, psychiatry, social work, they do get into it in part because they want to become such an expert. People can't say, look, physician, heal thyself. Nobody in the mental health space has it all figured out. That's why therapists are supposed to have therapists. I have my support system. On the Discord, the mods talk all the time as sort of gut checks and going, okay, how do we feel about this direction? What do we think about this decision? What are our plans going forward? Because nobody's got all the answers. And I do think, it's really frustrating to me every time I work remotely closely with a guy, somebody claims we're sleeping together, including Mary Jest, who's both married and gay. And I think that's a horrible insult to both our partners on that one. Not that there's anything wrong with polyamory, but I don't think that's the immediate assumption people should jump to. It is when I did the podcast with Rich Masucci over at, Review Tech USA, people claimed we were sleeping together. We don't even live in the same country, or that he wanted to, or so. It's just so, can we not do that? That element of a person's relationship is nobody's business until people make it their business. And I do think that is a shame tactic that does, I think because women are so used to that, it actually, and maybe this is just me, I am so fucking used to it. It annoys the shit out of me, but it's like, whatever. It's not going to change how I do things. But I do think men do, and it's what Anthony Mackie was saying about Falcon and Winter Soldier, that a lot of people got upset at him for. And I get why people are like, no, let us have our fun. Fair. But I do think it's fair for him to say, look, Bucky and Sam are just friends. They have a bond that isn't sexual. And that's what fan fiction's for. Fan fiction's great because it's not canon. I'm gonna, move on from there, but fair point. One person said that you're more likely to fall to level of training in a crisis. So, and this is very true. He gave the example of a crew chief of a helicopter putting on his baseball cap before he left a helicopter that had crashed in water, since he'd always put on the baseball cap before leading his helicopter, right? That training exists so you don't freeze in a crisis. And that's not just true of the military. That's not just true of first responders. We are taught that. We are trained as that, as people that work with other people's feelings. You know, what to do when someone is blasting you, what to do when someone is really angry with you, what to do when someone is really testing your boundaries. Basically, we're taught how to deal with angry people and even irrational people. And one of the things you're taught is that people are irrational. And to borrow from the title of Dan Ariely's book, people can be predictably irrational. And what to do about that, because you don't want to cause additional trauma through therapy or coaching, you know? But you also don't want to enable bad behavior. That's not helping someone, that's creating a codependency. And so you do have to be able to set those boundaries and say, you can do that if you want. I'm not taking away your freedom at all, just not here. You know, if you want to do that, do it somewhere else. And people don't like that. It's a, you know, art that's in a coma. And I think it's important to bring it back. And this is the comment I said, that this last comment is the one where I'm like, okay, somebody didn't get it. Because we said right at the beginning of the show that we did toxic femininity first, because we weren't saying that all masculinity was toxic, just sometimes it becomes toxic, and this guy decided to go here. It starts with not having a go. I just don't understand why it's considered easier to speak like this when it's clearly so divisive and prevents open discussion. My dude, you are totally having a go at me with your next phrase. And that's okay, but let's call it what it is, okay? Because it's very lame that instead of actually saying explicitly what you mean, women have latched onto toxic masculinity as a label coupled with an inevitable disclaimer. First of all, I'm literally a lame person. I have a bad knee. That's what lame actually means. But also, women? All women? Really? Because I don't use the term toxic masculinity. The name of the video was not toxic masculinity. It's when masculinity becomes toxic, meaning not all masculinity is toxic. How did you miss all this stuff? Really? And you're not having a go at me. And that's the thing. It's actually saying explicitly what you mean. This was his criticism of us. And yet he starts off by saying, not having a go at you, but, and then he proceeds to have a go. Physician, heal thyself. Going on. What exactly is the theme of these toxic traits if functionally masculinity itself isn't toxic? Okay. Toxic hypermasculinity, toxic hypomasculinity, toxic aggression. Can a dysfunctional female not embody these traits just as a dysfunctional male would? I guess you didn't see the last 2 videos that we did, because we talked about that. Whatever it is, if you're not referring to the package of average masculinity traits as a whole, why don't you call it something else and spare yourself and us the misunderstanding? If you are, then to be honest, there's a whole lot more to unpack and pick apart about the existential inherent inabilities of the human race. Did you not see the continues next week on the video, sir? This is so much projection, it might as well be the Dark Knight in IMAX, okay? Like, dude, you are exhibiting toxicity here. We did everything possible to make it clear what we were not doing, and you still took it there. Why? Because women. You said women as a group. If you're so afraid of women's opinions, that is an example of some sort of something that is toxic. And when we talk about, I'll finish the comment, but even your immediate example of sacrifice isn't masculine. Both sexes typically sacrifice for one another and have a natural indication to, but it would manifest differently, especially over the passage of ages. Yes, but women are not conscripted into militaries to go out and die when men are in a lot of countries. There's this uniquely masculine idea of sacrifice, or sacrifice tied to masculinity, that is toxic. I mean, say what you want about the IDF, at least both men and women serve. this idea that it's fine for men to go out and die and women aren't, that is a uniquely masculine connected form of sacrifice that I claim is toxic. And I think not only does it sort of make men think that their lives matter more than women, I also think it really undermines the value of women in society, because the belief is that women are distracting. Women are bad for morale. That's what it was back in the day. I do think that men-only conscription is a very dated concept. I think conscription in general is not something I agree with. It shows that we've seen that conscripted armies are less effective. They're less well-trained. The Canadian military is small and mainly made up of specialists, but it's one of the more well-regarded militaries in the world. And so I just don't see how you can look at something like that and not recognize that there is a socially constructed, specific type of sacrifice that involves men going out and dying for causes that women are not expected to do. Women are expected to, give up career to be a good mom. Yes, that's a form of sacrifice. It's not the same. There are definitely expectations on women and expectations on men that, if people internalize them, become poison to their souls. That is what we mean by toxic femininity and toxic masculinity. And we spent 2 or 3 damn episodes talking about toxic femininity. And it's no different than when we talk about, toxic positivity. Toxic, people pleasing is considered a toxic behavior, not because being selfless or wanting to do nice things for people is bad. It's because it's not something people do because they want to. It's because they see it as a survival trait or a way of making people do what they want to do. Positivity is seen as a good quality, but too much of it becomes toxic. Selflessness is considered as a good quality, but too much of it becomes toxic, as people have reminded me a lot of late. Being outgoing is usually considered a good quality, but you do it too much and you can be obnoxious. Intelligence is a valued trait, but you don't want to be a know-it-all. And I do think that there's a lot of really toxic attitudes surrounding introversion. I think introversion is a really, really important element of the human condition. I see it as one of my great strengths. Now, I mask all the time with this stuff. I do get exhausted by constantly dealing with stuff like this and being called old, fat, and ugly. It's the Carrie Fisher thing. It hurt my feeling. I loved Carrie Fisher. Rest in peace. Such a loss. But do I care all that much? No, because none of those things have anything to do with my character or my ideas. And if somebody has to be hot for you to listen to them, well, that's a you problem. You're losing out on a lot. But that's the thing. I mask extrovert. I perform extroversion, but I am not one. And too much of that will be toxic to me. It will make me sick. And so if you are doing things because you are a man, that I say exactly what you mean. Well, pal, you're not. Okay? You're not. You're not saying what you really mean. Some of your statements don't make any sense here. So maybe this idea that aggression is better, instead of putting some caveats on things so that more people can hear you, that's consideration. That's not dishonesty. And perhaps you're so invested in aggression because of false things you believe about what it means to be maybe a man. It's making you look foolish. Just saying. All right, I'll leave it there. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Can you hear that? That's the sound of that guy fuming. Can you hear that? Oh, yeah, here we go. Bask in that all weekend. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Remember, invites are going out soon next week. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Or the GoFundMe specifically to help fund our Discord chats and everything like that. Because all that's absolutely free. It's just we verify our members. Other than that, thanks for watching. Welcome to 2024 and have a great weekend.